because you need to learn. You don't know it all, and of course we didn't.
For us, that is our heavy metal album. We were more interested in that point of writing songs that were very guitar riff orientated, and the melody was just something that we just asked Joe to scream over the top, basically.
The High and Dry album was long dead when a new medium in America called MTV started playing a video for one of its tracks, Bringing on the Heartbreak, in heavy rotation.
They put it on while we were in the studio making Pyromania. And then when the album came out and there was a new video, it was sort of ready to go with it. And that definitely did help. There's no doubt about it that MTV was not paramount, but definitely part of the reason that we broke.
Perfectionist producer Mutt Lange once again in charge, the recording of the third Def Leppard album, Pyromania, turned into a seemingly endless project, one that wasn't expedited in any way by founding guitarist Pete Willis's increasingly serious drinking problem.
I never seemed to be able to relax. I think that was probably, you know, part of doing a concert and then coming off and you've got all this adrenaline. And the only way to calm down usually is to go and have a couple of drinks, and got too drunk one night and rolled up in the studio the next day. And, you know, this caused, I think we caused a big argument.
I mean, I could smell him from about 50 yards back. He was gone, man. I mean, I thought it was quite funny, actually, but they were warned not to drink. And he came in and he literally could not play.
And it got to a stage where it was like, well, this can't go on any longer. And we got to have a talk about it, and we sat down and said, well, we honestly think the best thing for the band is if, you know, you go that way, we go this way.
And so the minute, you know, Joe and the band decided to fire Pete Willis, they said, we've got to hire Phil Collins. I said, okay, let's do that, but at the same time, let's go down, bring him down to the studio and have Mutt sort of test him out on some songs to play guitar, because I'm not going to do anything until Mutt Lange said this guy's a good player. A week later, Mutt calls back and said, at least to me, he goes, he can play, he's really good. In fact, he's better than anybody in the band.
I think my first gig was the Marquee.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
With the band.
The old Marquee.
Yeah. And then we was doing like theatres, and then we went out to the States and we was opening up for Billy Squire and that. And then this album just like totally took off. What do you want? What do you want?
For Pyromania, Def Leppard had come up with some of the best songs of its career, and the band was determined to give them its best production.
And we actually got together and said, these songs are great. They deserve something bigger and better than the production that the last album had. Which is when Mutt said, well, look, if you're prepared to do it, I think that we can make a record now that nobody else has ever made.
I was very sonically aware of how screechy a lot of other hard rock albums sounded, very offensive, and there's no way the general public would ever like that sort of thing. I was always trying to make the guitars less offensive, less screechy.
Set up a musical trend for a start, because we ended up being kind of a blueprint for all the rock bands that came out during the 80s. And consequently, it leads to bigger and better things, because once you do an album like that, you have to follow it. Step inside, walk this way, you and me, babe. Hey, hey.
Def Leppard was having the usual excruciating problems recording its fourth album in Holland, and decided to return home to Sheffield for a Christmas break, which was when disaster really struck.
This Alfa Romeo came flying round the corner and overtook me on the bridge. So I just sort of carried on about my own business. But this guy ended up slowing down, so I caught up to him. And every time I wanted to try and overtake this guy, he would put his foot down. I'm going like, oh, I can't deal with this at all, you know. And Miriam's sitting there going, don't lose your temper, don't lose your temper. I'm going, no, I'm fine, you know. But this went on for about 4 miles. So I kind of lost my rag a little bit. And with it being a left-hand drive car, you know, obviously driving on the left-hand side of the road, when I finally did punch the accelerator, I didn't see this left-hand turn. And I ended up breaking my car in a big way. And I think the seatbelt actually took my arm off. It came unclipped and just came across my chest and just took it off. And I think the arm stayed in the car and I left via the sunroof. But apparently I was conscious for the whole thing, and I think that's what actually saved my life in the end. God, I never thought I'd be doing this again. It was a day just like today. I've got the strangest feeling in my stomach. God, this place is bleak. The last thing I remember was standing up in this field and just looking down and saying, I'm never gonna play drums again, ever. Where's my arm gone? And that was it. That's the last thing I remember. I'm sorry, I'm kind of lost for words in a way.
Initially, you know, the news was he'd lost his arm, which was dreadful, obviously, but he was alive, and our thoughts for at least the next 6 weeks were just on him, on Rick, and not on the record.
And then I just mentioned to him that he could, conceivably, if he could get his right hand to work again, he could actually play the drums by repeating the sounds on the top and the bottom. And he then, as he lay there, he started just doing that thing with his limbs. And I could actually see almost a light shine, you know, in his eyes, in terms of that. He thought, yeah, that's actually the one way out of it.
It's literally 2 drum kits combined. It's a series of electronic pads and a series of pedals. So I use my left foot on all the pedals. Obviously, I use my right foot on the kick drum, as I always did. And with my right hand, I play the pads.
The biggest we ever had was the return of the Thunder God.
The fact that he's there behind you and as solid as a rock as ever, you know, that is like the biggest compliment that he's taken for granted. He's just a normal human being. It's just a drummer. You know, and that's exactly how he wants it to be.
Between Rick Allen's traumatic accident and producer Mutt Lange getting banged up in a car crash and singer Joe Elliott coming down with a case of the mumps, Hysteria took more than 3 years to finish, a very worrisome length of time.
We took a big risk between Pyromania and Hysteria. We left it so long, you know, we was very aware and very frustrated the fact that so his new bands come, like Bon Jovi, for example, they were coming up, and we thought, oh, they're still in their thunder and all this stuff, because you get paranoid.
Initially, I mean, we've got to be honest here, Hysteria was a complete and utter disaster when we first started it. It was a complete mess.
We learned a hell of a lot from recording this album, you know, a lot about our own emotions, personalities and stuff, you know, obviously with all the stuff that was going down with Rick, and I think he inspired us a lot by, you know, having so much determination after his accident, which was a real positive thing. It made us, you know, finish the album off, basically.
The long delay turned out to be worth it. Hysteria rocketed up to #1 on the U.S. Billboard chart and went on to spawn 6 top 20 singles.
When Hysteria first came out, my particular radio station, when we heard it, we said, this is unbelievable. There's 12 songs on the CD. And we're going to play 10 of them immediately, what we call out of the box. Immediately, we heard 10 songs out of 12. That's unheard of.
We've always just made records that we would like to hear ourselves on the radio. Consequently, that's what we make, that kind of a record. And a lot of the bands don't want a big hit single, so they're never going to get that big.
Sometimes when you pull the plug,
Def Leppard came stumbling home from its Hysteria World Tour, too tired to do much of anything besides take a long overdue break. Despite the fact that the band had attained a lofty new level of hard rock success, though, the group's problems were far from over.
It was while we were taking the time off and we were sort of out of routine, where you're not having to get up a specific time, was when you start noticing Steve's drinking was getting heavier and heavier and heavier. Come 1990, it got to the stage when we really started trying to work on the record. It got to a state where it was pretty much impossible to do anything. We actually couldn't get any anything down on tape that was of any quality that we could use.
It was really frustrating seeing your best friend dying, basically, you know, and not being able to help him, and him not being able to help himself.
And we got together with Steve and said, look, you know, this is not doing you any good at all, and it's certainly not doing the band any good. If it's the pressure of this album that's getting you down, what we got as a suggestion is a very informal 6-month leave of absence. Well, it never came because he died in January. We tried everything we could. It sounds in a way that maybe we let him go, but we didn't. He never really believed he had a problem. So he kind of just suffered, and it got worse and worse and worse, and then one day he just fell asleep and never woke up.
I think it's definitely made us stronger. Whenever anything, you know, sort of slightly negative or really negative happens to us, it always pulls us together, not only personally, but musically also.
Again, we kind of applied some of the logic that Rick had, you know, when he had the accident. So we, after Steve had died, we just kind of locked into it and kind of, you know, went for it a bit.
Taking a keener-than-ever interest in production, Def Leppard turned out an album called Adrenalize. It debuted at #1, and the band continued as a 4-piece for the first video, Let's Get Rocked.
Steve was part of a bunch of guys that are all pretty much on the same line, and we managed to finish the record without him, so it wasn't as if it was ever going to be a threat to the end of the band or anything like that. It's life, and you just have to get on with it.
Steve's always with us one way or another, if not in a spiritual sense, in a sense that, like, just his influence. I mean, we spent years with the guy. I'd known Steve for 15 years, and you don't go through that amount of time without having some kind of effect on people. And Steve will have an effect on us till, well, forever.
I've never felt the band's jinxed. People mention it, you know, is there a curse on the band? John Bon Jovi's convinced there is. He won't travel in a car with me.
Leppard had always been a 2-guitar band, of course, so the surviving members kept searching for a replacement for Steve Clark, and finally settled on former Whitesnake and Dio guitarist Vivian Campbell.
I think we really knew in our heart of hearts that he was the right guy. You know, he was our age, British, plays good guitar, sings very well, and he plays football. He had everything that we needed.
Vivian Campbell!
I've always been a Def Leppard fan because they fused rock and
elements of heavy metal with what are very, very melodic songs. So I think it's for me personally, it's a natural progression to be playing this kind of music. I certainly don't want to play anymore, you know. Is that right?
To warm up for a world tour with its brand new guitarist, Def Leppard embarked on a brief European club tour.
Vivian's new to a lot of the material, so we just wanted to get familiar with each other in a less kind of hectic environment as playing in the round. So it's just really kind of like a glorified rehearsal.
It's a much more interesting concept, actually, for live performance. It's a lot more interesting for performer and for audience playing in the center of the arena.
Through death and disaster, Def Leppard has persevered. No matter how rough the going got, the band never called it quits. And if its members have anything to say about it, they never will.
What should never be forgotten is that we've had two massive tragedies happen. But we've had 12 years of great times as well. We're a band. We've always been a band, and we'll live and die being a band.
Seem to be showing all the symptoms of a viewer in need of a supreme fix for speed, danger, and split-second timing. Try MTV Sports for the ultimate adrenaline rush next.